what's up everyone? So I'm in the middle of working on this pressure washer. I got it pretty much like this, and the reason why we're gonna make a video, it's the reason why you clicked on the name. I'm gonna go over what you need to look for when purchasing a used pressure washer. Now, the reason why I'm making this is a friend of mine had a bad experience, and I want to help other people avoid this bad experience. So watch this before you buy a used pressure washer. So first things first, where do you locate it? That's really up to you. Facebook Marketplace is a pretty good place. Other places like that, I'm not going to worry about it. You can find your own spot. Next. Before that one, actually, I'm going to stick to the end. I'm going to tell you some pitfalls that might kind of lead you down the wrong alley. So stay to the end. I'll go over one or two of those. Anyway, so now we found the pressure washer. What do we end up looking for? Well, if the recoil was on this, I'd tell you pull on the recoil. If it has compression, that's perfect. Now, what you don't want to feel is it being stuck, obviously, or how a motor will end up working. The compression you're feeling should be like 5% the pump, and the rest of it to be in the motor. And the motor is not going to have a hard point when you're pulling on it until it gets to the compression stroke. So if it's an even amount of force and never really stops, that's a bad thing. Stop. You should have almost no problem pulling the recoil until a certain point, and then once you pull on it, you should be able to get past it, and then you can continue. So there's always that. So if you have a recoil and it's really hard, probably have engine or potentially pump problems. So imagine that all that's good. Now, if it has compression but it's not running, you can potentially get into a point where you could clean the carb. So if you want a better deal, and go right ahead. If it has compression, it has oil, check the oil, and follow the next couple steps as well before you commit to it. But as long as the price is right and you're willing to do the work, majority of the time, if it has compression and pump is okay, you're just looking at either a bad carb or a bad coil. 99% of the time it's a bad carb. Clean it, replace it, whatever it is, should be fine. If you don't want to go down that avenue, give it a pull and make sure the engine runs. Now obviously not everyone wants to meet at your house, and you may not have access to water, which might be a red flag, or it could just be the person's a little paranoid and they're just getting rid of stuff and they don't want you at their house. So ideally you would connect to a water source and then give it a try. If it runs and generates pressure, then you're good to go. Just buy it. Minus the next step. But if you don't have water, let's go ahead and go to the next step. Next step is to really eyeball the pump itself. Now, if you are connected to water and you notice that it's leaking from where you put the hose, the inlet, that's probably fine. It's probably just a old O-ring or seal. That's okay. Those are like $1 for like 10 of them. Don't worry about that. But if it's leaking anywhere else, I would avoid that. Now, if you don't have water, you don't have the luxury to see if it's leaking. So what you need to do is you need to really eyeball in there and make sure that is good to go. I'm talking the inlet. That one's pretty nasty. Or the outlet, the inlet. Make sure that everything's good to go there. What you're really looking for is cracks or obvious leaking of oil, because in here there is some pressure oil or pressure pump oil, and if it's leaking, it's probably cracked. And if it's cracked or the gasket's failing, then rebuilding a pump for residential pressure washer is just completely useless. Never do that. Just don't. So if you see anything wrong with the pump, that is a red flag, and I would walk away unless it's so cheap that you're okay with spending 70, 75, 80 bucks, maybe 60 if it's on sale, dollars for a new pump, and then install it. So that's really up to you. But if you want it to work when you get home, really eyeball that pump. Anything, the smallest of cracks, put your fingernail on it, feel it. Sometimes I understand it can be hard, but you really need to look at it, tip it over with the carb side up, of course, and really eyeball it. But if you're able to connect a hose to it, if it's leaking from the inlet, that's okay. Anywhere else. Now, imagine you do have water. and you see it's starting to build pressure. But that's not the end of it. What you want to do is let go of the nozzle. If everything starts shaking super bad, it could indicate the pump is starting to fail. Not failed yet, but starting to fail. It will shake a little bit, don't get me wrong. But if it's practically walking away from you, now, like I said, the engine's going to cause vibration, all that's normal. But we're talking violent. Don't do that. Not a good idea. Also, when you are doing this, if you get like a section of time where it has a lot of pressure and then very little pressure, a lot of pressure and then very little pressure, and if you hear air, like the end of your nozzle will be like spitting. That's okay. That's not a problem. That's normal, in fact. If you didn't purge the air, then that's okay. But if you did purge it, or if it does it all the time, don't do that. Pump is on its way out. That if you're using it, it shouldn't take more than like 30 seconds for that air to work its way out, like 99% of it. If you're using this for like 2-3 minutes and still doing that, don't do it. Now, another thing, this one's a little hard. Unless you've used pressure washers in the past and you kind of get a feel for how much pressure is in there, you really need to see if it's working properly. The best way to do that is, in my opinion, you get a very wide nozzle. On here, there's a 40. I like to put that 40 in there. The reason for that is even if you have subpar pressure in like a 20 or a 0, you're gonna get a pretty decent amount of performance out of it. A 40, however, you're really going into that realm of a wide enough area, more water is able to go through there and everything. So it's just a better test in my opinion. If you put that 40 in there and it's barely coming out, you can barely feel the pressure, you put your hand on it, it should sting a little bit. But if it doesn't, I mean, granted, if you're doing at 4,000 psi at 3 gallons a minute and you put your hand on there, you're going to be hurting, but it shouldn't be a problem. So if you have very little pressure when you do at 40, that's also a sign the pump is probably on its way out, so don't do that. So you want to have good pressure with a wide nozzle. Even if you don't have water, we're going to look at the motor now. How is the motor running? Is it spitting? Is it backfiring? Is it running appropriately? Is it really hard to start? All these things are important. If it's really hard to start, that could just be a simple motor problem. You can potentially use that to to get the price a little bit lower. If it's running perfectly, that's even fine. If it's pumping out black smoke, maybe you have a problem and you're gonna have to deal with it. If it's pumping out white smoke or blue smoke, more or less, then that could be oil. Now, that in of itself isn't horrible. Maybe it's been sitting for a long time. Maybe the previous person tipped it on its side. All that is okay. But if you let it run and it doesn't clear up within like a minute or two, then it's burning oil. Like I said, if it starts up a little chug, that's okay. It's normal. But a minute or two, And even if you, let's say you do 2 minutes, there could be a lot of oil in the muffler. I mean, I'll give the benefit to the engine. When you turn it off, if you see a lot of smoke continuing to come off from it, that's more likely than not the muffler getting hot, burning the oil that's in the muffler, and all is fine. Majority of the time when you're burning smoke, you're burning oil. When you first start it, it's in the cylinder, and then it gets pushed out and gets put into the muffler. And then from there, it just continues to burn, and you start to have smoke. Now, that's the good scenario. The bad scenario is it's continuously getting fed into the cylinder and pumping blue smoke out of the muffler, never really having to reach the muffler to burn, it's just burning in the cylinder. That's a problem. So keep an eye out on that if it's smoking. Black smoke, that's probably the best color, to be honest, because that can be easily fixed. It's just a fuel problem, more likely than not. So keep an eye out on that. Okay, so now that we've discussed most of that, if you have a good clean burning engine, the pump doesn't appear to be doing anything weird when it's running, and it runs and makes good pressure. Or if you're unable to look for it, it doesn't have any cracks, and the output and the input look clean, and you're kind of confident it's going to be okay. Maybe the person is getting rid of it because they're moving or whatnot, then okay, you're probably safe. But here's the pitfalls I was talking about. If you do go to a person's house and they have it 100% prepared, like hoses on, air is out, and they're in a real big hurry, they very well could be covering up a problem. Maybe the pump. What ends up happening is there is something called the unloader valve. It's in there somewhere. And what will end up happening is over time, there's like this little plunger that goes in and out. That plunger sometimes can get stuck. Now, that's not horrible. You can fix that, or just get a new one. That's fine. But when you don't fix it right and you just kind of compress it and put it back in, it will run, but it's going to continue to do that over and over again. You really either need to replace it, or you need to replace the pump, or you need to clean everything very thoroughly so whatever caused it to get stuck isn't going to continue to get stuck. So if it's 100% ready, more likely than not, the person may have been messing with it, or they're just in a hurry. You really have to kind of gauge the situation. But I really don't like to see that when I go to a place. I like to see it just chilling in a driveway. I ask if we could connect it. I connect it. I do everything. Runs just fine. No problem. Prepared, that could be a lot. It could be as easy as they know it smokes, so they want to have everything ready. That way you only let it run for like 10-15 seconds, because you're not over here to clean the driveway. You're just here to buy a pressure washer. You see it makes power, or it makes pressure, and then you turn it off and you put it in the back of your Kia Soul or whatever you drive, and then you get home. Next thing you know, you have no mosquitoes around your house because there's so much blue smoke. Not a good thing. So that is a pitfall I would stay away from. Obviously, what we talked about are all kind of pitfalls to look for, but those are going to be the harder or easier ones to see. The one I see a lot that causes the most issue is it being prepared and not letting it run long enough, which is another thing. If you are able to let it run for a good minute. Look at it. Is it surging? Is it doing anything weird? Like I said, if they're really wanting to turn it off really fast, there could be some funkery. Or it could be really hard to start, and that's why they're getting rid of it. Now, before you do that, I would also kind of put your hand next to the muffler. If it's not hot at all, you can't feel anything, or if you can even touch it, then it's fine. That means that they're having to run it. It's a lot easier to start a warm engine than a cold engine. So maybe it has a hard time starting, that's why they're getting rid of it, but they say it works. And you don't want to deal with that nonsense. They'll let it run, put a little starting fluid in there, get it started, and then when you get back, maybe they have it running for like, I don't know, 2-3 minutes before you get there. They see your car coming, they turn it off, and then they go back inside. You get out, they get them out, they pull the cord, go to run for a minute or two, no problem. Well, then you get home the next day and it's really, really hard to start, and then you realize you might have got a bad one, and you're going to have to watch a different video of mine to fix it. See my point? So those are a couple pitfalls I would stay away from. So like I said, if this helped you out, put a thumbs up. I'd be grateful. It helps me out a lot. If you like what you see, keep watching and subscribe. Definitely follow me on Instagram at SmallEngine101, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good night.